What if I told you that one of the most respected spiritual masters in history started out as a complete and total failure? Seriously, this is the story of a monk who began with absolutely nothing. No talent, no support, and what looked like no future at all. I mean, his teachers thought he was hopelessly slow. They gave him the simplest task you can imagine for a monk. Just memorize a single short verse. And for months on end, he just couldn't do it. His failure was so profound that his own brother, who was this accomplished senior monk, finally lost all patience. He kicked him out of the monastery, telling him flat out that he just wasn't cut out for the spiritual life. And yet, this same man became one of the most revered, enlightened masters of his time, someone capable of performing what people could only describe as miracles. So the question is, how? How does someone go from rock bottom to the absolute pinnacle? Well, that's the mystery we're diving into today. Now, to really get a sense of just how wild this transformation was, we're actually going to start at the end of his story, with the big climax. It's an event so incredible, it honestly sounds like an impossible miracle. Okay, just look at this contrast. It's staggering. On the one hand, you have the struggling monk, Kulapanthaka. It took him 4 months of trying every single day, and he still couldn't get one verse to stick in his head. On the other hand, you had the enlightened master he became, the guy who could, in an instant, manifest 1,000 identical versions of himself, and who had the entire Buddhist canon just appear in his mind in a flash of insight. The gap between those two people seems completely impossible to cross. So, to understand how in the world he bridged that gap, we've got to go back to his lowest point. Let's rewind to that moment he was utterly dejected, having just been kicked out by his own brother. So it's really important to get how deep this struggle was. His name, Kulapanthaka, literally means little roadside because he was born on the road. His older brother, Mahapanthaka, was this well-respected monk who tried to teach him. But Kulapanthaka was described with the word dando, which basically means extremely dull. The task couldn't have been simpler. Memorize one short 4-line verse. But for 4 straight months, it was just this cycle of failure. As soon as he'd learned the second line, the first one would just, poof, vanish from his memory. And finally, his brother just had enough. He looked at him and said, "You are not fit for this teaching. Leave this monastery." Can you even imagine the heartbreak? Being kicked out not by some stranger, but by your own family for something you just can't control. At that point, he was convinced he was a failure and decided to just give up and go back to a normal, secular life. But, as he was leaving, totally heartbroken, he had an encounter that would change absolutely everything. The Buddha himself saw him and stepped in, not with some complicated lecture, but with a lesson that was surprisingly simple and pretty unconventional. The Buddha didn't try to make him memorize another thing. Instead, he just handed Kulapanthaka a perfectly clean white piece of cloth. And the instructions were so simple. Step 1, face the sun. Step 2, rub this cloth. Step 3, while you're rubbing it, just keep repeating the words, removing dirt. And step 4, just watch what happens. That's it. A task so simple, even someone who couldn't memorize a single verse could do it without a problem. So Kulapanthaka sat there, rubbing the cloth, and he watched as it slowly turned from pure white to a dingy gray. And he thinks to himself, wow, this cloth was so clean, but my own body has made it dirty. And right then, it just clicked. He realized the physical dirt on the cloth was just a metaphor for the inner dirt, the raja, or dust, clogging up his own mind. Things like greed, hatred, and delusion. He understood that the real cleaning job wasn't on the cloth, but inside himself. That one powerful realization, that was the key that unlocked everything. By focusing on this single simple concept, his mind completely broke through all of its old limitations. And in the space of just one morning, the monk who couldn't memorize a single verse became fully enlightened. He achieved a state of perfect wisdom and clarity. Later on, when the other monks were just marveling at this unbelievable transformation, the Buddha explained that this wasn't just some random fluke. Kulapanthaka's potential was always there. It was just hidden. And to explain what he meant, he told them a story from one of his past lives. He told them that, you see, this wasn't the first time this soul had shown an incredible ability. The ability to take something that looked completely worthless and, with just the right insight, turn it into something amazing. So in this past life, Kulapanthaka was a poor young man who overheard a wise merchant say that a clever person could start a business with, get this, a dead mouse. So he takes him at his word. He sells the mouse to someone as cat food for one tiny coin. He uses that coin to buy some molasses, which he then trades for flowers. Later, after a storm, he cleverly gathers up all the broken branches in the king's garden for free and sells the firewood to the royal potter. He even corners the market on grass right before a big horse trader comes to town. And his final move? He uses all his capital to put a deposit on an entire ship's cargo, then sells shares to other merchants for a massive profit. And the total fortune he made, starting with that one dead mouse? 200,000 pieces of currency. An absolutely mind-boggling amount, all built from the smallest, most worthless-seeming startup capital you could possibly imagine. So what on earth does a dead mouse have to do with a dirty piece of cloth? Well, this is where these two incredible stories click together perfectly. The connection is just beautiful, really. In one life, the so-called worthless thing was a dead mouse. In the other, it was a simple, repetitive task with a piece of cloth. But in both stories, when guided by real wisdom, that tiny, insignificant start became the seed of something truly great. First, a massive fortune, and later, complete enlightenment. And the Buddha boiled this whole principle down into one powerful verse, which is really the lesson for all of us. He said, "A wise person with small capital can raise himself up, like fanning a tiny fire. You don't need some huge roaring bonfire to start with. All you need is one tiny spark, and the wisdom to know how to gently fan it into a flame." And that really leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? What is that seemingly small, maybe even worthless-looking opportunity in your own life? What is your dead mouse or your piece of cloth that with just a little focus and wisdom could be fanned into a fire? Definitely something to think about.